All right. Welcome to the next video in the series of tarot. I guess you could say the philosophic system of the tarot, the Kabbalah, the Western mysteries, deeper secrets. We've been spending about an hour on each card so we can learn all of this stuff, right, on a deeper level. So before we get into this lesson, here's the path. And now that we've done all of the cards that have spawned from the lower personality, right? So we've done all the cards, or the world or the universe. We've done, which is the middle path of devotion. We've done over here, this path of judgment. We've done the path of the sun, moon, star, right? So now we're about to cross this barrier into the higher self. Once we've learned these lessons or understood these other lessons, and this is where it gets dicey because the tower is about to shake things up, so to speak. But one thing I want to say too that you guys need to remember that the spheres are like densest form of the energy. The spheres are objective, and the paths between the spheres are subjective. So you could say, for instance, this path that we're doing now, which is between Nutsack here and Hode here, those objective energy spheres. This path is going to be the balancing of those two spheres. We're learning the balance or the in-between of those. If you're on one, then it's polar opposite as the other. So if you're going to learn the balancing of these. So it's like the overall balancing, the way I look at it, once we get past all the personality stuff, now we're getting into the higher stuff. So we've learned from the intellect on up to the higher self, the emotions on up the higher self that's pulling us up, kind of. So we've studied all these, and these are hard. They were pretty hard. And in your life, they're pretty hard. And in ceremonial magic or whatever system that you're doing, they're pretty hard. But let's say, for example, that, and I'm just talking about path working as a whole, we're back here in the star card, okay, where we were before. So that means it's a subjective path between the spheres of Netzach and the purple sphere of Yesod, right? It's subjective, and it's almost like a balancing out of those two spheres. So learning the extremes of the poles of both of those energies and also the middle, too. That makes any sense. I'm hoping I'm making sense because all of this stuff is energy, right? So here in the tower, this energy is an energy where we're kind of set above all of those earlier energies. So you could say, in a sense, and this is just my opinion, okay, the higher self on the emotional side, or the unconscious emotional dream side of the star, has started to initiate us. The sun, our childlike side, the intellectual side, has started to initiate us. So we're coming into that authentic desire, that authentic will, and our authentic selves. And usually when we come into that, a balancing needs to take place in another card that we'll talk about later, right here. But before that balancing needs to take place, a tower happens. A total devastation. And that's where we're at. Or at least that's what it seems like, the tower. Not really that much of a devastation. So let's jump right into it, because the higher up the tree we climb, deeper this stuff goes. Path of pay. This is the path of pay. The tower. The 16th key. Path color is scarlet or scarlet red. The related sound is C natural, corresponding with the planet Mars. The meaning is the mouth. And the double letter is grace indignation. The esoteric title is the Lord of the Hosts of the Mighty. And on the 32 paths of wisdom, the 27th path is represented here. And this is called the active or exciting intelligence. And it is so called because through it, every existent being receives its spirit and motion. There's some Mars energy up in here. So the path of Pe, or the tower, connects the center of the reasoning process, Hod, with the center of the intuition or desire nature of Netzach. I just showed you that in the tree example there. Well, my gate's too high. Let's turn that down. All right. It is the balancing path of the personality that's related to Mars and to the north on the cube of space. But the quarter, known traditionally in the mysteries as, quote, the place of greatest darkness, because it's said that the sun never shone in the north of Solomon's temple. However, we are instructed that light comes from darkness and that, quote, gold comes from the north, and that enlightenment has its origins in the hidden sources of power which terrify the minds of the ignorant. Pe is a double letter in the Hebrew alphabet, meaning that it is one of the gateways of the soul. So all the double letters correspond with gateways of the soul. With two possible directions of passage, this one. As a word, Pe means mouth. An orifice related both the taking of nourishment into the system and the outgoing of speech. In the first case, we understand that it is through the function of this devastating path that the higher energies are brought in to innervate the personality. So when we eat food, it crumbles down and gives us energy. Same thing when we eat, I guess you could say, take in the higher self of the spirit, it devastates stuff, it crumbles down so we can have higher energies, higher experiences. So, and while spiritual nourishment passes into the system via the symbolic mouth, speech passes out of it. Anyone who's done any practical esoteric work is aware of the singular importance of words and of the sounds of which these words are composed. The vibration of a God name or its utterance in such a way that it can actually be felt in the body has a definite effect on the physical vehicle as well as a concomitant. I don't even like that word that Wang uses. It just has a pretty cool effect on the psychic vehicles too. How about that? Concomitant. This is a fact easily tested by the student, although the effect on the psyche may not be completely perceived by the waking consciousness. But, quote, words of power, properly vibrated with Martian force, help to bring about the destruction of our own personal towers, so to speak. False concepts and institutions which we believe them to be reality, but they are not. They are not. But it should be understood that to tear something down is to make room for something new. Now, there's deeper stuff in here. I know this is kind of obvious in the card itself, but it gets much deeper than this. Mars may be a god of war and destruction, but it is also the god which rules over the fertility of crops too. And relative to speech, we know that the Logos is called the Word. Most versions of this key picture a tower set in a desolate landscape being struck by lightning. Figures fall from it as the crown is struck off. In the most simple of terms, this symbolizes the sudden destruction of our perception of what we think reality is or what constitutes reality. But the tower is the concept of what most people call the I. The personality awareness being shattered by an influx of force, revealing something of the nature of the higher self. The tower also symbolizes all man-made institutions, whether that means government, religion, or any accepted man-made values. However, this is not to be construed as the striking down of evil. In fact, one title of this card is actually called the House of God. The spiritual learning process involves the continual building up and striking down of concepts formed only as useful stepping stones into our own inner worlds. For example, on the paths we first encounter the archangels in some type of anthropomorphic guise, and this appears to be their reality, especially if we may not have believed that archangels exist in the first place. What we encounter are contact pictures that we have, which have been established through centuries of meditative practices. But these are useful creations of man, rather than being the true and pure consciousness of the archangelic beings, though. So, to encounter the archangels as formless consciousness means to destroy another tower which we have created. Yet these towers are necessary and sacred. So we have to step our realities up. As they get destroyed, we step to a higher reality. They're like the densest expressions of ourselves, our bodies, for example, temples of the Holy Spirit, so to speak. Appreciating this, we learn to apply the underlying principles of each path without being bound by their necessarily artificial outward manifestations. We know that any path we follow is by definition artificial, whether that be Kabbalah, Hinduism, Catholicism, Judaism, any religion, Buddhism, and that each carefully laid brick of these structures will ultimately be destroyed as we gain higher senses of awareness and consciousness. I didn't say it. Robert Wang did. I hope the religious people don't get mad at me, but it's true. It really is. One key symbol of the tower is its very isolation. If you look at the card, it stands on a desolate mountaintop. Most individuals perceive themselves in this way. Most of us do, right? We think of ourselves as totally separate units of consciousness from everyone else. So the destruction of the tower means to experience the true ego, which is really not ours alone. The lightning flash on the tower is a sudden realization or flash of perception of our real identities. That lightning is in the shape of the circle and the spear of Mars to indicate the power which initiates the experience. On the Golden Dawn and Wake cards, the lightning strikes at the crown or at the top of the tower, which is an obvious reference to the crown of Kether, right? So that's an obvious reference where it strikes at the top to the crown of Kether. Come on, circle. The top of the tower, so to speak. Hello. Sorry, it's late night again. Talk about tarot late night. Wow. But what is symbolized here is the false crowns of our own existence, those man-made values which we believe that control us. And one of the meanings of the crown here is the will. The primal will of Kether, which is the only true reality. Our conscious attempt to align ourselves with this primal will brings about the destruction of our belief that we actually have a personal will. The reference to Mars on the 27th path points to the path's correspondence with Gabura, the fifth sphere. So the reference actually points to the sphere. That's why it's the same color. Hello, which we know is also corresponds with the number 5 and the pentacle or pentagram, etc., etc. Represents the Martian force. You'll learn. You know all this stuff. I don't know why I'm telling you that. You know that. Here, the activity of Gabura in a sort of tearing away obsolete values takes place. Of course, it must be reiterated that the Sephra are the centers of objective energy, while the paths in between the Sephra are our subjective use of those energies. So in varying degrees, the energies of all the Sephra are on all of the paths. In this case, that of Gabura being predominant. So we also recall that Netzach and Gabura, Venus and Mars, are integrally linked, and that the gods associated with both Hod and Netzach are called the gods of armies. Hod and Netzach, right? So those two that I have circled there. The green one, you could say, is Venus, and the orange one, you could say, is Mercury. God names, like Aphrodite, that's one. We could think of another one if you want. God names of Hod are the orange ones, Mercury, Thoth, Hermes. The gods of armies, I guess. So it is for good reason that Crowley subtitled his card War. Throughout esoteric literature, spiritual self-development is often described in martial terms. The Bhagavad Gita, for instance, describes a symbolic battle of the component parts of the self. Krishna is the higher genius, guiding Arjuna into his inner and personal field of battle. And far too many people make the mistake of assuming the process of spiritual development to be one of light and life and sweetness. This is a misconception fostered primarily and honestly by Christianity and the New Age. The tower points out that inner growth must be a painful and overwhelming process. It is. It's like being constipated, but you'll get there. Nature is not always kind to us. And once we invoke the inner forces, we soon discover that what we get is what we need. And that is not always what we want. Most of all, it's often not what we expect. So the branches of the tree of life are, as this card suggests, filled with surprises. The surprise and suddenness of insight is symbolized both in the Golden Dawn and in the Wait card by the lightning flash. Now, Crowley's version represents the same principle, but attempts to demonstrate some of the more subtle shades of meaning, or the meaning of the path. He tells us also that his card represents the preface to the coming of a new era, shown in the 20th key of judgment. His version of the tower represents the destruction of the old order. As in the star, same thing. Crowley uses straight geometric lines to mean that which is made by man. And he points out that since perfection is nothing, literally no thing, all manifestations, however glorious they are, however delightful, are just stains. And his card, the all-seeing, let's pull this card up while we talk about it. Why not? There we go. I mean, you could see it, but you could see it better here. And his card, the all-seeing cosmic eye, observes and directs the disruptive process of the tower's destruction, while Dis, a Roman god of the dead, belches flames from the structure's base. On either side are the serpent and the dove, representing the two forms of desire, the will to live and the will to die. And he says that they are also the masculine and feminine impulses. And in both the Golden Dawn and Wait cards, two figures are shown falling from the tower. And we'll go back to that, to the main frame here. See the two figures falling from the tower? Sure you do. Now, Case explained them as the dual modes of the lower personal consciousness. Actually, just consciousness and subconsciousness, while Mathers called these the kings of Edom. Waite presumably agreed with Mathers insofar as his two figures both wear crowns. A reference to the kings of Edom leads us to some very subtle meanings of this card. The fall of the kings of Edom refers to the conquest of that nation by the Jews led by Judas Maccabeus. There is, however, a much deeper meaning embedded in that fall, a meaning which is discussed at some length in the Zohar. That book states that prior to the creation of our universe, there were other universes or forms of existence with which the divine creator was displeased, in which he thus reduced to a state of chaos or nothingness. The tower, furthermore, has other biblical implications. It is the Tower of Babel, a parable wherein the relationship of speech tower is clearly shown. And after the flood, the descendants are said to have settled in Babylon, or Babel, where they built a city of brick. They built a tower in a supposed attempt to reach up to and conquer the heavens. Seeing these men as coarse and ambitious, God sought to punish them in the story, where previously the whole earth was of one language and of one speech, and men could work in unison. God imposed diverse languages, forcing a dispersion across the land, remember? And in symbolic terms, the building of a tower of false notions results in confusion. It is acceptance of the limitations of, quote, language, meaning the structures of any particular culture. In this sense, then, the tower kind of also represents the structure of individual religious systems. Those who are locked into the bricks and mortar of any system are unable to see beyond that system to the divine unity and purpose which is the light of all true religions. The extent to which the implications of this card go even further, even more deeper and more secret and more occult, go far above even the level of the Christ Center of Tifereth, which is shown by the three windows in both the Golden Dawn and the Wait cards. The number 3 is a reference to the supernal triangle at the top of the tree, meaning that the activity of the tower somehow involves our cosmic selves. Crowley uses the symbol of the cosmic eye, or the third eye of inner vision, but the meaning is precisely the same. Here is the involvement of God the Father. Now, what happens is that the path of the tower may be considered the affirmation of the primal will, that it alone is the true crown, or let's just say, our initiatory soul will that comes from the highest, thus bringing into balance in the self the pure positive chokma and the pure negative bina, which stand at the top of each pillar in our individual internal trees of life that are inside of all of us. In fact, the whole tree of life is involved in this path on some level, and Waite suggests this by placing the tower between two sets of falling yods. The descending spirit, adding up to 22, the number of the Hebrew letters under the paths, and here it will be recalled that the lightning flash is the very means of creation of all 10 Sephiroth. In the Golden Dawn card, let's pull that one up. Let's zoom into that one. All right. So in the Golden Dawn card, an even more profound suggestion is made concerning our human value systems. On the right hand is seen the tree of life, while on the left is another tree, which is the clip-off. As the tower is struck down, the opposites of good and evil are suddenly viewed differently, and one knows that all that is in the universe is part of the one Creator. And again, as has been repeatedly stated, every created thing contains the seeds of its opposite. To this point, we have considered the psychological implications of the path, ideas which may easily be derived from meditation on the card. But the tower involves even deeper meanings than that. Some symbolism rarely found in any print that you're going to read. This symbolism is purely, that's right, sexual. There is sexual symbolism in all of the occult, for the reasons of the opposing two energies, of course, but in the past, the meaning of certain symbols was only broadly suggested because many in polite society might find them shocking. One such symbol is the tower itself, which is actually a phallus. Moreover, the mouth, pe, may be interpreted at one level to mean the opening of the male reproductive organ, that from which the yod, or seed of life, issues. Yeah, that's a really nice way of saying some other things, right? So Crowley's card more than hints at this by the form of the mouth breathing fire on the lower right. And in his diary of 1923, let's pull up Crowley's card. Boom. Yeah. I wish I had someone switching slides while I was reading it, but I got to do it. So, in his diary of 1923, he's pretty explicit as he speaks of the blasted tower, which is really a phallus shooting forth the lightnings of seed. The fire is the destroyer and the renewer, for it forces the transmutation of energy from one form to another. It is thus the initial activator which will ultimately lead to fruition. This becomes clear as one asks the question, what happens to the tower? Here seen in the process of being consumed. The answer is that what happens is exactly the same as in our physical world when something burns. Energy is released to be restructured and to manifest in an entirely different way. Thus is an extremely important lesson about the nature of transmutation of energies in the universe embedded in this card. The transmutation is so all-pervasive that it is found at every level of the tree of life. And knowing that the Mars energy is the universal sexual force of the microprosopos, and that the image of the tower is in some, though not all ways, the phallus, points to one important meaning of the card. It is the higher sexual energy destroying the perception of the personality about the nature of the sexual function itself. It is destruction of the perception of sex organs itself in orgasm. And as earlier noted, one of the precepts of the mysteries accurately states that, quote, God is sex, end quote. Needless to say, this precept was not much bantered about in the Victorian era. And there is still another complex mystery to be encountered here. It goes even deeper. This is the mystery of circumcision, an idea that's implied by the striking of the crown from the top of the tower. This is unquestionably one of the most secret meanings of this card, and one which is supported by gematria. The letter Pe has a value of 85, which we discover to be the same value as the Hebrew word for circumcision. It might also be added that when they conquered the Edomites, the Jews forced them to be circumcised. which allowed the Edomites to be absorbed into the Jewish society. So the rite of circumcision is a very obscure origin, but it's a practice known to have been spread by the Egyptians. And biblical text shows that a number of ideas were involved. One, it was related to the preparation for marriage. In the case of the mysteries, this may be taken to mean what is called by the alchemists, quote, the chemical wedding. And two, it was a rite of initiation into a social group. Three, it was a redemption offering, as is described in Leviticus. And four, most important, it was a token of the covenant between Abraham and God. And in ancient terms, this meant an agreement between two parties, not as a contract in the modern sense of the word, but as a bilateral pledge of loyalty. So then that means it may be interpreted that the fall from the tower, the sacrifice of one's perception of the sexual function, which is, quote, a symbolic circumcision, is required continually of mankind to maintain the covenant between Abraham and God, or lower self to the higher self, to maintain the given path by which one may return to the source of all things. But this is also initiatory. It is a preparation for the knowledge and conversation of your holy guardian angel of Tifereth. Interestingly enough, the biblical text calls for circumcision of all male children on the 8th day of their lives. The correspondence with the 8th Sephirah of Hod, connected to Netzach by the path of the tower, can certainly be suggested here. A very hidden thing. The tower is the phallus, but this is only symbolism, and the symbolism does not mean in any way that the path is exclusive to those functioning in male incarnations. The path of pay exists before we even become a male or female. It exists prior to the point of differentiation of the sexes for incarnation, and is thus an amalgam of both masculine and feminine energies. And on this path, we must focus on the male component of the sexual force, as on other paths, we have to deal with the female components. A male or female body does, however, make some differences in the way one approaches the lower paths beneath Tifereth. Energies are polarized differently in the experiences of a path, according to the sexuality of the physical vehicle, and this makes no practical difference in individual workings. Only in group workings are such polarities of necessity considered. Very interesting. Now, like when people pull this card in divination, all you're ever going to hear is, oh, there's a shakeup, man. There's some kind of shakeup. The tower's coming in, and that's all. That's all people say about divination. So Paul Foster Case, let's pull up Case's card. That was Wang's introduction. So right off the bat, we can see in Case's card, we've got the letter Pei, the tower, the 16th key. The tower's on top of a mountain. We got two people falling here, male and female. Crowns busted off the head, 22 layers of bricks, 3 windows that correspond to the top of the first supernal triangle. On the right, we've got 10 yods that correspond with the 10 Sephirah. On the left, we've got 12. Well, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, we've got 12 yods that correspond with the paths, or actually not the paths, but I guess you could say the letters. The 12, whatever letters they're called. Can't think of it right now. It's late. But anyways, that corresponds in total to the 22 paths of wisdom, right? 10 plus 12 is 22. Sorry, 10 plus, wait a minute. What am I talking about here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Yeah. So it's just the 22 letters. It doesn't correspond with the whole 32 paths of wisdom, just the 22 letters. So you got 12 and 10. Anyways, whatever, man. Let's let Case talk about it. So Case says this: we now come to the second stage of spiritual unfoldment, which is the awakening from the dream of the sense of the nightmare of bondage. Now, remember, in Case's book, he's coming from the top down. So the nightmare of bondage was the illusion of bondage in the 15th key of the devil. But we're going from the bottom up, like Wang teaches, right, as we ascend. So the first stage, as was brought out in the last lesson, is the realization of bondage and the first intimation that it is, after all, but a dream or just an illusion. Key 16 is obviously a picture of destruction, but it is important to notice that the source of the destructive power is the sun, and that the power comes forth as a flash of lightning. And this is obvious symbolism of the flash of superconsciousness that constitutes our first awakening. It is the first moment of clear vision, after which no person is ever the same again. It is like the hatching of a chick from an egg, and once the shell's broken, the chick can never return to the egg. It has definitely entered upon a new phase of existence, and a new, fuller life is opened before it. At that moment of illumination, he or she receives an initiation, and then they belong to a new order of things. In the Book of Tokens, in the meditation on the letter Pei, pronounced Pei, which is assigned to Key 16, says, quote, "Verily, destruction is the foundation of existence, and the tearing down thou seest is but the assembling of material for a greater structure," end quote. Now, a little observation will convince you that the destruction is the foundation of existence. Our entire lives are spent in creating and destroying that which we've created. The food we eat, the clothes we wear, the automobiles we ride in, they're just things, first and foremost, but all are in a process of destruction from the moment they start. From the very first moment we put them into use, they're on a path to destruction. And in the very act of destruction itself lies all of the utility that can be extracted from them. So while we're in that ride of destruction of these material things in this material world, we learn everything we need to know while it's destroying itself, right? So, in the sense of spiritual unfoldment, awakening is distinctively actually a destructive process. All of the customary wrong thinking and wrong acting has to go, and the false sense of personal will, of our own little desires that we think we have, of self-action, it has to be destroyed. And this is not a comfortable process. When a man is forced to recognize that his most cherished beliefs are false, or the consequent readjustment that happens, that's not easy. But this destruction is essentially a gathering of materials for a far grander destruction, and it is how we grow spiritually. The first chapter of the Gospel of St. John says, quote, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were made by it, and without it was anything made that was made. And in it was life, and the life was the light of men." End quote. This passage refers to the power which we have studied before in other lessons, in which we have learned was not only the force utilized in reproduction, integration, and creation, but also the force that manifests as the opposite of those functions, destruction. Hence, the Book of Tokens and the meditating on Pei, which means literally the mouth as an organ of speech. Sorry, my cat was doing something crazy. That states, "I am the mouth, whence issueth the breath of life. I am the all-devouring one, whereunto all things return." It is this power that is active in the disintegration of the old forms of personal consciousness, the rending of the veil that hides the truth from mortal eyes, the teaching that this breaking down of form is fundamental in the process of the life power, or the life power self-manifestation is very important. The practical occultist has to learn that he cannot hope to reach any goal that he set for himself without first breaking up the conditions in which he finds himself when he formulates his desire. Right? Because we always want to go when I get here, I'm going to be happy. Well, you're not there now. And the reason why you're not there now means you have some kind of foundation that needs to go. So in occultism, as in everything else, we cannot have our cake and eat it too. And by the way, I hate that phrase. I mean, why have cake if you can't eat it, right? They should come up with some other phrase. Like you can't have something, in other words, you can't cheat. Don't cheat and lie, just so you can have more than everybody else. How about that? Not really what it means, but it's easier just to say that. So before we can find release from the limitations that bind us, we must learn how to break them up. The time to begin this process of breaking up the old limitation forms is now, right now, not sometime in the future. You've already made a good start if you're studying this stuff. You're aware of your limitations. You're making an effort to transcend them, as is witnessed by the fact that you've made the effort to follow these instructions or listen to these videos, or you're in the tarot to begin with. So as you proceed in this, other practical methods of combating these limitations will be given to you, and things of splendor will unfold within you. But your first step is to apply the principles which tarot represents in your daily life to build the keys into the very structure of your being. Not just study the cards so you can read them to people, right? But to build the keys into your very being. Right discrimination is the first step. The application of the principle represented by key 16 to the circumstances of your daily life requires concentration. Superficial observation doesn't work. You must give attention to the meaning of your thoughts, desires, and actions. You must apply the principle of limitation to overcome limitation. Does that make sense? This is shown by the number of this key, 16. The man who has learned to concentrate rarely places himself in embarrassing positions through rash and inconsidered action. And boy, have I learned hard lessons about that. He usually thinks before he acts and then acts wisely. The planet Mars is represented by key 16, and Mars is the planet of war and rash action in exoteric astrology. But it's also the planet of the driving force behind all successful activity. So we see that the way the Mars force manifests in us depends entirely upon whether we control it and make use of its driving power, or whether we allow it to control us, thus inducing foolish and rash activity and, causing chaos and stupid crap in our lives. This power that we're talking about is the Mars, or the desire force behind Mars, or the desire force itself, which is behind and implicit and hoed in that sack. The control of desire is not repression of desire. No man without powerful desires and emotions can ever attain the higher phases of consciousness. You have to have them. And furthermore, the Mars force can never be successfully, quote, repressed, for it will always burst loose if you try to do that. And when it does, it's terrifically destructive and screws your life up big time. Now, books on psychoanalysis and abnormal psychology are full of horrible examples of the perversions of people and human wrecks caused by repressing your desires, but the channels of expression of desire are, however, perfectly controllable. This is the key. The force that makes a man desire to steal is the same as that which makes him desire to endow a hospital. Does that make sense? It's the same force behind both activities. Now, if you look at key 1, which is the magician, this contains the secret of proper control of the Mars force. Formulate your desires using intelligent discrimination, and then bring them into manifestation by concentration. Make your mental images of the desired result sharp and clear so that the subconsciousness receives definite suggestions with which to work on. Because your subconscious will always try to bring the work forward. And if you concentrate and you're specific, and you can control this force, it will come to be. And the activity of the dynamic Mars force will make your dreams come true literally and in every sense of the word. So some very old versions of the key, 16th key, are named the House of God, which we talked about earlier, and others are called the Fire of Heaven. Still others bear the title the Lightning Struck Tower, of which that on our present version is a short form. But there's a tradition that it refers to the fall of the Tower of Babel, which Wang talked about, at which human speech is said to have become confusion of tongues. Thus, it's related to speech and to the letter Pe, or the mouth. The old Bible story indicates that it is a mistaken use of language to try to reach heaven with a structure of words. The correct use of language is to control the forces of nature by making words the tools of organized thought. When we try to use words to define the supersensuous states which are beyond words, what happens? We get confused, or confusion is the inevitable result. But the lightning flash comes from a solar disk to show that the active force at work in the picture is, in spite of the seeming destruction wrought by it, a phase of the working of the life, or of the one life power, or of light and life. The form of the lightning flash is noteworthy, though. It is so drawn that it represents the complete expression of the 10 aspects of the life power that are mentioned in the pattern on the trestle board. This symbolism is borrowed from a fairly well-known diagram which represents the 10 aspects of the life force and the form of a lightning flash. And if you go back to the previous videos, we show the lightning flash that hits all 10 Sephiroth. Okay. So in relation to the second stage of spiritual unfoldment, the lightning represents the sudden illumination or flash of inspiration that comes to us when we've faced our particular problem with courage and boldly and have concentrated the full force of our attention upon it. Note that the end of the flash is in the form of an arrowhead, which is a symbol of the letter Bet, attributed to key 1, which is what? The magician. Now, the tower itself is built of bricks laid in 22 courses. Thus, it represents a structure of human speech or thought, or the Hebrew alphabet, of which the components are the letters of that alphabet, which are 22. The tower represents a structure of error and ignorance, which is at the same time a house of God. Nothing is more true than the fact that these physical personalities of ours, even though they are the temples of God, are also structures that incorporate our false notions of ourselves and our false ideas. And if you go to the OBE videos that I do, like William Buellman talks about this heavily, the blind leading the blind, all of our false notions, we have to stay open-minded so that we can grow, are also structures that incorporate our false notions. The ugliness and then inadequacy of our bodies, their want of grace and comeliness, are the results of false ideas and the outcome of our false words. The lightning flash of true perception always makes itself felt in the physical body because we have to perceive it. There must be a period of physical readjustment before we can pass on to higher states of development. Now, the crown which is knocked off of the tower is a symbol of willpower because the Hebrew word Kether, meaning crown, is always anonymous with the will. And this is a false crown that needs to get knocked down. However, and its nature is made plain by the 4 letters M, which is ornamented here, but in the Hebrew M is mem, and the numerical value of mem multiplied by 4 is the same as that of the word of Cain. Cain, the first murderer, is the personification of the false ideal of willpower, the idea that every person has a will of their own, separate from the willpower of the collective and separate from the cosmic will. Right knowledge begins with a flash of perception which makes us realize that no detail of our personal experience can be separated from the total expression and experience of life itself, or life power's activity. And however brief this realization may be, it overthrows the notion of separate personal will and also disrupts our mental structures based upon the thought that we are living life in perpetual antagonism to the universe and to the lives of our neighbors, which is how a lot of people live. Nobody gets me. Everything sucks. I don't understand people. Everyone's out to get me. Or they set themselves above or apart from everyone and everything in some kind of way. This is the error that is behind every murder. And this is the error which is overthrown by even the briefest perception of the basic unity of everything and all that exists. Now, in the card, the falling figures represent the 2 modes of personal consciousness to which we give the names of conscious and subconscious. We talked about that earlier. The flash of inspiration represented by this key upsets all of our former notions of personal consciousness and reverses our old ways of thinking. In this picture, the figures are clothed here in this card to indicate that their true natures are concealed. 22 yods are shown suspended in the air. Yeah, I was trying to make them into 32 earlier for some reason. But 10 are on one side of the tower, so disposed that they form the Kabbalistic diagram of the tree of life. These on the other side are symmetrically arranged, and these letters really stand for the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet because every letter is said to be some aspect of the letter Yod. That's why you see Yods in these cards, because all the other letters spawn from Yod. We can get into the Hebrew stuff later in that whole story of the Hebrew alphabet. That's a whole other thing. But yeah, all the letters spawn from Yod. So that's why you see Yods in all these cards. Fire of Yod, right? So thus these letters represent the sum total of cosmic forces, and they also represent the elements of consciousness which enter into the makeup of a human personality. Now they are hanging, as it were, looks like they're falling, but hanging in space in order to present symbolically the idea that none of these forces has a physical foundation. None of them. The Yods. There's nothing physical about them. This idea is just the reverse that's suggested by the rocky, isolated peak upon which the tower is standing. The average person thinks of his life as having a physical basis, that he's the physical body, and that his life is sustained by food, air, water, and the various physical forces in his environment. But ageless wisdom says just the opposite. It explicitly declares that the one life power is the basis of all manifestation whatsoever, physical or otherwise. It by no means denies the importance of physical things, much less the actual existence of the physical plane, but it does declare that the physical world is the manifestation or expression of the powers of spiritual life. In other words, it says that instead of life being supported by the conditions of the physical plane, these conditions are supported by life. If that makes sense. Rewind it if it doesn't. So while it's undoubtedly true that certain definite physical conditions must be obtained in order that certain functions of human personality have to be exercised here on earth, it's not true that those conditions are the causes or the support of those functions. It's on the contrary. The cause is the life power itself, and it is the life power which manifests in the physical conditions in question. The latter are the effects rather than the causes of manifestation. So, Paul Foster Case wants you to devote yourself this week to a study of your desires. Think about your desires. Most of us are beset with a veritable riot of miscellaneous desires. We desire all kinds of things all over the place, and most of them are pretty unimportant, weak, and temporal. The enlightened person is a person comparatively of few desires, but those desires, those few, are deep, powerful, and pointed. And such a person shoots straight for their mark, allowing nothing to turn them aside from their purpose. Their thoughts dwell upon it. Their activity is directed to its attainment. So, during this week, select your most important desires. Do not allow less important ones to interfere with them. Such small desires dissipate energy that you need, that should be utilized in important things. The reason most people never get anywhere is because of just such unconcentrated dissipation of desire force. Better one thing well done than a dozen half done or half-assed done or scattered all over the place or done badly. This is an exceedingly difficult exercise, but super practical in the occult world. It may look easy on paper, but it might actually take you a lifetime of effort before the desire nature is brought under control, bringing that Martian force under control. So don't make the mistake of sliding this lesson. Don't let it drop at the end of this week either. You have to practice this constantly. You'll be lost in occultism unless you can control your desires, because the time will come when you will have to prove such control. Remember that desire is symbolized by the lion, and then that's one part of the Sphinx. And unless you have learned to control him, he will eventually destroy you. So begin the practice today. Man, I would love to leave it right there. Paul Foster Case, told you, man, he's the man. But we have to jump to Crowley's teachings, right? We have to. How far are we into this thing? 49 minutes? Oh, yeah. We're right on time. We can do this. So, here's Lon Malo Duquette. I love reading Lon Malo Duquette's book on the Thoth deck. Hopefully you understand this card a bit more. The Lord of the Hosts of the Mighty, the planetary trump of Mars. Its original design is a tower struck by forked lightning, human figures thrown, then suggests the letter and his system, IN, by their attitude, but the Hebrew letter means pay, or the mouth. The tree of life path is the path of 27, joining Netzach, or victory, to Hod, splendor. Remember, Crowley's path is a little different. His letters and stuff, a few of them and all that, might correspond differently than to the rest of all the teachings, but the colors are right. Scarlet red, Venetian red, bright red, and rayed azure or emerald. And let's show all the trees in all four worlds so we can get that picture up. Where is it at? Boom. So that's actually the energy in all four worlds. Break down the fortress of thine individual self, that thy truth may spring free from the ruins. The house of God appears to me as a vortex, not a mouth. Or is it yours, which can't be filled by mortal effort, try as you may? Harris to Crowley. No one knows the date. Lon Maudeket goes on to say, have you ever watched the phase of a large construction project? And in the first phase, the land is cleared by smoke-belching bulldozers. Trees are ruthlessly ripped from their roots. Grass and vegetation is plowed under and raked away, then cut up or burned. It's a scene of utter destruction and desolation, and if you were to take a photograph of the site at the end of phase 1, you would have a picture of a damn catastrophe. However, in a year or two, the picture changes. Construction has taken place, and now there stands a magnificent building, landscaped with grass and trees and flowers, and perhaps a beautiful little waterfall and lake with a swan or two. In the Thoth Tarot, phase 1 is represented by a 216, the tower, and phase 2 is represented by a 220, the Aeon. The tower is not the end of the world, it just looks like the end of the world. It is quite simply what Crowley calls the manifestation of cosmic energy in its grossest form. The tower is the planetary trump of Mars, and it incorporates most of the images that characterize traditional versions. A blasted tower with human figures falling from it. Now, most older versions, however, show the tower being struck by lightning from above, as if by some heavenly wrath. But in Crowley and Harris's version, the tower is blasted from below by flames belching from the mouth of the underworld. The Hebrew letter Pei means mouth, and this is a most significant reverse in symbolic imagery. Another feature unique to the Harris version is the presence of a large eye at the top of the card that seems to radiate a zigzag of lightning or fire that may be the spark that has ignited the flames from the mouth below. It's still a phallus with a hole at the end. Sorry. But in the Book of Thoth, this eye, which Crowley refers to alternately as the eye of Horus and the eye of Shiva, causes him to wax quite philosophic. He even teases us with comments relating to sex magic in the eye. Here's my Crowley. There's a special technical magical meaning which is explained openly only to initiates of the 11th degree of the OTO, a grade so secret that it is not even listed in the official documents. It is not even to be understood by the study of the eye and a 215. Perhaps it is lawful to mention that the Arab sages and the Persian poets have written not always guardedly on the subject. All right, well, if all this eye stuff is so secret, why even bring up the subject? This is an extremely narrow and esoteric reference that Crowley knew full well would not be understood or appreciated by the vast majority of readers, but we already read about it from Wang earlier, so we know what it really means. Obviously, the eye refers to various body openings and the psychic centers to which they are linked. Now, while all this is very interesting from a clinical sex magic point of view, it really doesn't help us too much in understanding the general meaning of this trump. The concept of the eye of Shiva, on the other hand, does. The Hindu trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva respectively create, sustain, and destroy the universe. Shiva is the god of destruction, and to destroy the universe, Crowley warns, he need only open his eye. Here's Crowley. Shiva is represented as dancing upon the bodies of his devotees. To understand this is not easy for most Western minds, because Crowley thinks we're all stupid, but briefly the doctrine is that the ultimate reality, which is perfection, is nothingness. Hence all manifestation, however glorious, however delightful, are just stains. To obtain perfection, all existing things must be annihilated. I get it. I love Crowley's drama. The traditional title of the tower is the House of God, or Destruction of the House of God. And in chapter 1, verse 57 of the Book of the Law, the goddess Nuit makes a direct reference. Here's my drama of the goddess Nuit. You ready? Invoke me under my stars. Love is the law, love under will. Nor let the fools mistake love, for there are love and love. There is the dove, and there is the serpent. Choose ye well. He, my prophet, hath chosen, knowing the law of the fortress and the great mystery of the house of God. Nuit's talking about Nakansu, whatever, Crowley, the prophet. We see the dove and the serpent near the great eye at the top of the card. The dove has an olive branch in its mouth, and Crowley describes the image like this. The serpent is portrayed as the lion serpent, as Anubis or Abraxas. These represent the two forms of desire, what Schopenhauer would have called the will to live and the will to die. They represent the feminine and the masculine impulses. The nobility of the latter is possibly based upon recognition of the futility of the former. This is perhaps why the renunciation of love, in all the ordinary senses of the word, has been so constantly announced as the first step towards initiation. This is this is an unnecessarily rigid view. Thank you, I agree with you on that. This trump is not the only card in the pack, nor are the will to live and the will to die incompatible. Placed in perspective, this is not such a bad card after all. The citizen of the Aeon of Horus is no longer to fear natural processes depicted in the tower. When the Duquette's own crowned and conquering child, their son Jean-Paul, was 4 years old, Lon asked him what will eventually happen to the world. Or Jean-Paul asked Lon what would happen to the world, and Lon told his son. He said, I told him that nobody knows for sure, but that the Hindus worship a god called Shiva, who is responsible for destroying the universe. All Shiva has to do is open his eye. I said, and the universe is completely destroyed. What do you think of that? And without a moment's hesitation, Jean-Paul answered, well, then he closes his other eye. And I'm still thinking about that, Lon says. Very cool. So hopefully you understand the tower now. Deeper meanings of it, all of that stuff. Did we do Paul Foster Case's correspondences, I wonder? Because I think we passed that up, like really fast for some reason. Because everybody had a list of correspondences, and I think we passed that up. Let's go back up here and look real quick before we end this video. The second stage of spiritual unfoldment. Case. Yeah. The tower, the Roman number 16, the key number 16, the Hebrew letter of Pei, which corresponds to 80 or 800, which breaks down just to 8. The meaning of signification is the mouth. The Kabbalistic intelligence of the 32 paths of wisdom is the exciting intelligence. The power aspect of consciousness here is the awakening. Astrology equals to Mars or Tuesday. The human faculty is grace and sin. The color is red. The note is C. The path on the tree is between Netzach and Hod. In the cube of space, it is known as the North, and in alchemy and metal, it is iron. We got it. See, now you know all of the occult meanings of this card. There's nothing else to know about it. Nothing. Every detail has been explained to you. The windows, the fire, the fallen people, the crowns, the lightning flash, the sun, all of the different levels of interpretation as to what it means of the destruction of things, the destruction of our perception, the destruction of what our ideas of the will are, why we should control this desire for us and what it does if we don't, the sexual meanings of it, the internal, like occult, esoteric meanings, all of the little symbols in each card and what they mean. There is no reason why you don't know what this card means anymore. However, the deeper thing here is once you understand that intellectually, right? So this is what we've learned now. Now we know what this card means intellectually on this side. We have to figure out what this card means on the inside. You know, we got to control that force. He said it may take a lifetime because we're too damn impulsive. And now that we have the understanding of the card, how do we get the wisdom? Right? By balance. It's a heavy lesson in this path. And they get deeper and harder as we go up the tree. But that's how we grow spiritually, right? I think the next card is the devil, which was kind of the first one that we did. That would be the 15th key. So we've already done the devil. I leaded with that one to get everybody's attention because for some reason, all humans like shit to be scared out of them, for them to be interested in anything nowadays. So it worked. We got a few people interested. So I think we'll skip over the devil for the next path. But if you want to do these in order, just go to the first video in the series, which is the devil. I'm going to go to bed. Meditate upon this card. Maybe if you're really into this, do what Kay said, study your desires all week. Find out which ones are screwing you up and causing the really important ones that you have deep down in your heart, soul, and life. The ones that connect, and those are usually the ones that connect to your higher self and to the collective. Find out what those are, and then see the distractions of the other ones, and then learn that's what the magician is all about, is controlling this force that we're studying right now. Oh, it's getting deep, isn't it? All right, love you guys. See you on the next video.